So hey y'all, I'm back with another video. So tonight's video is yet again another Chioma Chats video podcast edition. So by the title, we're going to be talking about hypocritical parents, especially hypocritical Black parents. I feel like this is a topic that I can directly speak about, being that I came from the strict parent club, the strict African immigrant parent club. And if you're a part of that club, you know that there's just a big two-sided quality about the way how you were raised. Now, I will say I am very grateful for my parents and their sacrifices, and honestly, even their discipline. As an adult, it has definitely shaped me into the person I am now. Part of the reason why people compliment my intelligence and my drive and me being only 25 is due to how I was raised by my parents. However, no one is perfect. Parenting is not easy from what I've been told, and there are certain cultural and generational practices that I think deserve to be discussed. In today's case, we're going to talk about the rapper T.I. Now, everybody knows T.I. is heralded as the king of the South in regards to rap music. He came out during the early 2000s, and he is a rapper out of Atlanta. In his older years, he has transitioned from being the young gangster rapper into the family man, a father figure to all of his children, as well as being a father-like presence in Atlanta, Georgia. I've always admired ATL. I wanted to move there when I was in college. I've since changed my mind. However, in being in Atlanta the few times I did go, T.I. has a big presence in ATL. It's been told to me that he owns a lot of the businesses and real estate in ATL. So he is technically supposed to be this stand-up guy who went from literal rags to riches. However, like I said, nobody is perfect. And I feel like one of T.I.'s biggest faults is the way how he parents. And I think T.I. expresses a lot of what Black parents do that can be considered stereotypical. And that is being a hypocritical parent based on the gender of the kid. T.I.'s son, King Harris, who recently turned 18 years old, recently got arrested. So his mugshot goes viral. He's looking crazy. I'm seeing the Playboy money tattoo on his neck, and I'm like, this can't be the child of one of the most prominent figures in hip-hop music, as well as the Black community within ATL. But lo and behold, it is. So King got arrested because apparently or allegedly he was driving. I think allegedly he had some substances in the car. He goes to jail, pretty much bonds right out, and then gets on Instagram Live in a bathtub, basically taunting the situation and trolling people who have something to say about it. I knew that that would happen, being that King, like I said, recently turned 18. And kids who recently turned 18 just feel that they have stepped into a new portion of their life, which they have. However, the tendencies to act very childish, immature, and sporadic is still at the highest level it'll actually ever be. So when you turn 18, everybody wants that respect to be an adult. However, a lot of the actions are still very impractical to be considered adult life. But I will say, you live and you learn. We've all been there. I made most of my huge life mistakes when I was 19, and that really wasn't even that long ago. So I was waiting for T.I.'s response because I knew he would have to address this. The last time King went viral for his antics is when he got into it with a Waffle House worker on IG Live, and he was being very rude, disrespectful, and very braggadocious about his place in the social and economic hierarchy, basically saying that he was flexing the fact that he was rich. And it seemed that T.I. was very passive about the situation. He didn't really put much emphasis on the severity of King's actions, and at that time he was a minor. And I thought it was off-putting because at the end of the day, if you're going to be heralded as someone with a positive reputation within being a father, even though a lot of us know that is nowhere true about T.I., not to say that he's a bad father, he's very active in his kid's life, but he's also still participates in a lot of foolery. But he should have applied more pressure if he was going to say anything publicly. I personally think that all of that, and even this situation, should have been handled in the privacy of their own home. However, we know that all of these celebrities and influencers don't live private lives. Part of who they are is to be within the public as a job. So we judge and make commentary accordingly based off of what they put out. In this recent situation with King's arrest, T.I.'s response was very lackluster. Just to summarize, he basically said that his child is going to do whatever he wants regardless of his parenting, his wishes, his upbringing, and regardless of how T.I. feels. And as much as I agree with that message, I think it's fair to point out that this is very hypocritical. Many a times within Black and especially African or Caribbean cultures, parents are very hypocritical, especially when it comes to the gender of their child. Boys get passes for doing worse things than girls. It's one thing to be harder on women just because we do have the tendency to be a little bit more vulnerable or even naive. However, a lot of Black parents really push unfair ideologies onto their children based on their gender. I think this is is a topic that a lot of Black children and even Black adults need to discuss because it's actually very frustrating. So I've broken this video down into one overall main talking point. So without further ado, let's get right into this video. So my one and overall main talking point is blatant gender-based hypocrisy within parenting. I think it's more than just obvious that Black girls get harsher treatment from everybody. Our parents, our peers, and just the world overall. When you're at home as a kid, your parents are supposed to be the people who teach you, discipline you, and make you the person that you are. So we entrust in our parents to give us fair treatment and prepare us for the real world when we're not with them. I'll be the first one to say that men and women are not equal. I think there are a lot of women, especially Black women, that like to make comments as if men and women are to be equal and that we should be able to do what men do. I disagree. I don't even think that men should be thinking that they deserve certain things that women get either. I don't know if it's social media. I don't know if it's all of the crazy examples of gender bias that have become a lot more public. I don't know if it's the times that we're living in or a mix of all three. But there has been a lot of commentary about gender bias and what men do and what women do and what both genders don't do. However, when it comes to the treatment of a person, that should be equal. The love that you give for your children should be equal. The discipline should be equal. The support should be equal. And the trust should be equal, especially when it comes from the people who birthed you. In this case, T.I. just shows so much blatant disregard for the inequality that he places on his children. And I think what irritates me the most is that it's very obvious and very public. This is a common practice amongst Black parents, and for whatever reason, young Black girls are demonized more for everything that we do. I remember that my brother could go to sleepovers, but I couldn't. I remember my boy cousins were allowed to play video games after dinner, and we had to go to our room and clean and read, things of that nature. And some of the gender biases aren't too bad. I mean, we all do have gender roles. However, when it comes to parenting, I think Black parents put a lot more emphasis and strictness on their daughters because women traditionally aren't respected or in some cases even appreciated. And I've witnessed this as well as experienced it. Like I mentioned in my monologue, I come from the strict African immigrant parent club. It's almost an indelible part of the culture for women to be diminished to servants of men, unintelligent, incapable, and just beneath men. And I think that goes for almost every part of the world, being that patriarchy exists in every historical component within the world. Things like this, especially for Black people, go way back to our African ancestry. Men were the prominent figures of the family who carried the family name, held important political and family positions, and had the right to do whatever without consequence. So this idea of patriarchy being so historically embedded in humanity also showcases itself in modern day households with how children are being treated by their parents. So the rambunctious wild child who is a boy or man, and in this case T.I.'s son King, is able to be talked to or disciplined in a subtle manner about something that is very serious and could create a chain reaction of lifelong legal problems and behavioral issues. However, the approach that T.I. took in basically inappropriately exposing his daughter's sexual business by saying that he is still a part of her hymen and virginity checks at the age of 18 is aggressively defended by T.I. and almost made to be seen as acceptable. I will give a few points to T.I. for at the very least being interested in his daughter's sexual health, as I do think fathers should want to understand that part of their child's life to a certain degree. However, it's more than common sense to know that your dad should not be accompanying you to your gynecologist appointments when you're an adult. And to be honest, I don't think your dad should be accompanying you to your gynecologist appointments when you're even a teenager unless there's no mother figure in the picture. I remember when T.I. basically got dragged for that incident with his daughter Deyjah, who was very embarrassed that this information was public. And it was probably because her father practices hypocritical parenting that is fueled by gender-based bias. I get it. No father wants their little girl to be sexually active until they're married. However, there are millions of daughters who have been sexually active since they were teenagers or in their early 20s who are still smart, polite, law-abiding citizens, respectful of their parents, and so forth. I think the value of women, and especially Black women, is so skewed that men equate sexually active women to having to wear the scarlet letter. And if you know, you know. But what I mean by that is men think that as soon as a woman is sexually active, her value goes down. But it's like, who do y'all be having sex with then? Like, for real, who do you expect women to have sex with, procreate with, fall in love with if there's a huge portion of men that are so extreme about a woman's sexual desires and practices? Imposing this overbearing presence on your daughter's vagina is not the flex that a lot of men think it is. So many Black fathers think that being strict about things that are going to happen is being a good father. And quite frankly, it can be the exact opposite. Children, teenagers, and even those of us in our 20s are still at a very everything is new to me stage of our lives. I mean, I'm I'm learning a lot and I'm 25. So the curiosity to want to explore things such as sex, weed, drinking alcohol, going to clubs, and all of that is natural for both boys and girls and young women and young men. And when you imply overbearingly strict practices on your kids, the results are usually the exact thing that you were so scared of or trying to avoid. I understand it's hard to be a parent, but I'm going to need Black parents to learn how to speak to their kids. Part of the reason why a lot of the gender-based hypocrisy happens is because Black parents don't know how to speak to their children. Black parents are so quick to yell at their children, call them names, put them down, diminish them, and equate them to nothingness instead of actually teaching, communicating, and setting an example that they want their children to follow. I find it funny that T.I. would want his daughter to obviously remain a virgin or be very smart with her sexual partners. Meanwhile, he has 3 baby mothers and 7 kids. And I know what some men are saying. Well, we don't want our daughters to end up meeting a guy like me or who I used to be. And that is a viable concern and a good one to have. However, the way how most men are approaching preventing that literally leads to why your daughters are thoughts, hoes, and popping their on a pole at 17 years old. You cannot fight fire with fire. All people, but especially children and teenagers, have temptations, especially in 2022 when we are in such a transparent world where information is at the palm of our hands. So unless you explain to your kids what all of these nuances are that you think that they won't understand until they're older, they're going to experience these things on their own. Sometimes I hear the responses that men give about why they parent their daughters the way that they do, even for my own dad growing up, and no offense to any of the men watching, but a lot of the thought responses are giving brain dead and dingbat. I'm just being real. Again, you cannot fight fire with fire. You cannot scold your daughter for having an interest in boys, as well as going out of your way to ensure that her virginity is intact by imposing fear on her and thinking that she'll then turn around and be transparent with you, trust you, and respect you. Black children are almost forced into respecting their parents, and I feel like you should respect your parents. However, Black people have this weird way of not grasping that respect is a two-way street. And I think that because the community has long put emphasis on parental figures being that much over their kids, that a lot of Black people go into parenthood thinking that they are inheriting respect instead of building respect from their child. If my parents would have just talked to me about a lot of things as a teenager, I probably wouldn't have made a lot of mistakes or choices that I made as a teenager and young adult. Instilling fear in your child has reverse effects on whatever your initial thesis is. The aggressive yelling, the unnecessary beatings, and the frequent insults is going to cause your child to do everything that you don't want them to do and essentially resent you. And Black people live by this parenting style and then wonder why they have a lot of rambunctious kids who are raised by the streets or raised by their friends. Nobody is saying don't discipline your kid, let alone whip them, but you have to implement discipline as well as understanding. A lot of times Black parents don't act as if they were once our age, but will always say, I used to be your age, I used to be young. So going back to the point of T.I. and his hypocritical parenting, it's crazy how little he had to say about his son's arrest. And I guess it's pretty subjective in defining which of these actions are worse than the other. Would you rather have your 18-year-old daughter having sex or your 18-year-old son catching charges and going to jail? And for some men, they might say they'd rather have their child in jail. But that's just one of the detriments of Black people and their negative mindsets. Black people, I give praises where praises are due. I support and wish for a lot of success within our communities worldwide. But there are a lot of things that Black people need to be checked on. And what we value and what we excuse is definitely one of them. Being that T.I. comes from the background of being in and out of jail, slinging dope on the corners of Atlanta, being in that street life at a very young age, it's almost like he's empathizing with his son King and being less assertive about how serious this is because he's been there before. But to me, a father equally parenting their kids and showing equal love and fairness would have had the same energy in his public response for his child that he would have for his daughter. If you ask me, your 18-year-old daughter having sex is not that serious. If she is safe, she understands repercussions of her actions, she's on birth control, and her partner is somebody who loves and respects her, what exactly is the issue being that she's an adult? And I get it. Fathers are very fragile about their daughters. My dad is the same way. But regardless if you have a son or a daughter, you know at one point your child is going to make choices that show that they are growing and decisions that you may or may not agree with. That's just a hard pill to swallow. And I know I'm not a parent, but I just want to know if all of the parents could tell me in the comment section, what exactly is so hard about talking to your child about sex? I'm not a parent, but I really don't think it's a hard conversation to have. And I don't don't even think that parents think it's hard. I think that parents just don't know when to do it. It is a very awkward conversation. I know. I had it at 12, 13 years old. But Black parents do this thing where they delay giving their child life advice and viable commentary for young people because they either can't fathom their child getting older, still look at their child as a baby, and are trying to prevent their child from being in the know about things that are adult topics. But when you do that, you're causing your child a disservice. So things like your 18-year-old son getting arrested for having weed in the car happens, even though he's a public figure and comes from a very rich, well-known, and successful family. I want to end by reading an article about this. It is from people.com, and it is pretty much an overview about T.I.'s son King and this situation, and mentions a little bit about T.I.'s daughter Deyjah. The headline reads, T.I. responds to video of son King, 18, discussing his arrest. I know that energy. Video of King Harris discussing a recent arrest surfaced on social media, prompting fans to reach out to T.I. and wife Tiny Harris. It starts, T.I. is thanking fans for their concern about his son King after the 18-year-old revealed he was arrested. Video showing King Harris discussing his recent arrest appeared on social media on Thursday, along with criticism that the oldest son of the rapper and wife Tamika Tiny Harris was proud of spending a brief time behind bars for charges that have not been made known publicly. On Friday, T.I. posted a video to Instagram in which he responded to a fan's comments about his son. I know my son. Think I ain't spoke to my son? Think I ain't told my son, his mama, his grandmama? His tail is going to prison. If he keep this ish up, his tail is going to prison. Ain't no way around it. Ain't nothing I'ma be able to do about it, he continued, adding that he's already had that conversation and already made my peace with it. The rapper continued, cause I know that energy. I was that energy. I know exactly how it's going to turn out. After stopping to take a selfie with a fan, he continued, King is a good kid chasing after the wrong ish. I trust in God to deal with it the way he sees fit. Noting that he did everything he could as a parent to address his behavior while raising him, he said that now that King is an adult, he's gonna have to go through it. T.I. vowed to love him through whatever it is that he's going through because he believes his son is trying to convince himself of things, as well as do as young men and even young women growing up try to convince ourselves that we are certain things. Time is going to be his teacher, he concluded. In addition to King, T.I. and Tiny are parents to son Major, who is 14, and daughter Eris, who is 6. T.I. is also father to daughter Deyjah, 21, and sons Domani, 21, and Messiah, 22. Tiny is also mom to daughter Zanique, 26, who made the couple grandparents after welcoming her daughter Hunter Zoel in December 2020. In October 2020, Zanique addressed controversial comments her stepfather had previously made about going to his daughter's gynecologist appointments to check the status of her virginity, noting he changed after the controversy. Zanique says, I feel like it's a lot of stuff he didn't realize when it comes to a young girl's feelings. So I feel like now he's a little bit more careful, she said at the time. He just goes about everything a little bit differently now. Definitely. He's more sensitive with everything. So T.I. in his Shakespearean words were kind of limited in his commentary for King, and I found it interesting how lax and passive he was. Note that he said that he already had a conversation with King, I guess off of social media, but why wasn't that given to Deyjah? Why didn't you sit down with Deyjah and explain to her sexual relations and make her feel comfortable about going into that chapter of her life? Like, what he's saying is not wrong, but it's basic. I know he's apologized publicly about the Deyjah incident, but an apology without changed behavior is really just damage control. I saw T.I. recently did a stand-up comedy act joking about his son's arrest, and it's like, T.I., you literally do my homework for me. Like, for real, you literally proved my point. You wouldn't have gotten up on any stage to joke about your daughter having sex, let alone being arrested. I know Zanique said that he's been way more sensitive about stuff like this, and I hope so. But I really feel like T.I. is who he is and very misogynistic. If T.I. and other Black fathers taught their sons to be virgins and have penis integrity, you wouldn't even have to worry as much about your daughters. You can't keep teaching your sons to be horny hot dogs and then wonder why your daughter's boyfriend is the 17-year-old version of who you are or who you used to be. Some parents think they are being protective of their daughter when they're really being protective of their ego. The energy of parenting within a household has to match, because then all it creates is a feeling of pressure and inadequacy when your daughters start to realize that they are not favored and not allowed to make the same choices or even mistakes as their brothers. I want Black parents to not necessarily neglect traditional methods of parenting, but implement the privilege of how open and communicative we are as a society today. Speak to your kids, educate yourself, get to know your kids better, and most importantly, if you want your kids to respect you, trust you, and honor you, treat your sons and daughters fairly and equally. So that is it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed. Please let me know your commentary on my commentary down below. What do you think? What do you know? Let me know. If you haven't already, make sure you follow me on all of my social media networks, and I will see y'all in my next video. Bye, y'all.
Baby Glock with no baby. I want a 7 Series Mercedes, and I know you mad if you play me.
for y'all that hate me. Neck white, ice dripping rabies. Wrist frostbite, please save me. New fit on and it's rainy. Roll the scepter out, Allegheny. Up all night while you snoozing. At the W while you losing. Toes all white, yeah, they cooning. 9 strokes in, now he oozing. So stop like a red light, you sweet like a biscuit. And they gon' watch this queen shit like it is Netflix. They bite and suck me like a damn mosquito. And your man be licking me like fingers and Cheetos, bitch. Whole lot of chummers on they ass. 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 Riding in the 05 Camry. Long legs call me Bambi. Tryna make a Billy, not Mandy. Keep my foot on your neck, it's a stampede. Whole lot of chummers on they ass.